Welcome to this explainer. I am literally beyond excited to share this one with you today. We're actually going to go ahead and skip the traditional agenda so we can dive right into one of the most unbelievable business journeys of our time. I mean, we are looking at the story of the world's most polarizing piece of footwear. It's a product that people absolutely love to hate, a company that flew way too close to the sun, and a brand that somehow, against all odds, pulled off one of the greatest retail resurrections in history.
Okay, let's dive into this. Picture this. The year is 2002. Three friends, Duke Hansen, Scott Siemens, and George Boydeker, are on a schooner sailing through the Gulf of Mexico. Duke was going through a pretty tough time, so his buddies organized this trip just to cheer him up. Now, during the voyage, Scott, who was the kind of guy who loved tinkering with new inventions, brought up a pair of bizarre black foam shoes he'd found from a Canadian company called Foam Creations. He had actually modified them by adding a little heel strap. But when he proudly showed them off, the boat went dead silent. And then they just burst into laughter. Duke took one look at them and said, "Scotty, those are ugly. I am not going to wear those."
But here is exactly where the story gets totally wild. 4.1 billion. That heavily ridiculed, thoroughly mocked, weirdly shaped black foam shoe didn't just survive the laughter of those friends on the boat. Fast forward to the year 2024, and it had transformed into a $4.1 billion revenue juggernaut. Seriously, from a literal joke on a boat in the Gulf of Mexico to a multi-billion-dollar global empire worn by everyone from hospital nurses to A-list celebrities. So how on earth did that actually happen?
Well, let's look at Chapter 1, the ugly boat shoe, where form meets function.
Now, what's really interesting here is the sheer engineering behind the ugliness. It is fascinating. See, when the three friends actually humored Scott and tried the shoes on during that boat trip, they were absolutely stunned. The shoe was made of this proprietary material called Croslite. It weighed a mere 170 grams, which is like 2 to 3 times lighter than any of the alternatives. But the real magic? As you wore it, your own body heat actually softened the material, molding it perfectly to the unique shape of your foot. And because it was a closed-cell foam, it didn't absorb water at all, meaning it dried instantly and was completely odor-resistant. Add in this exceptional grip that wouldn't leave scuff marks on a boat deck, and suddenly you have the ultimate practical tool for boaters, chefs, and really anyone working long, grueling hours on their feet. Totally convinced they had a winner on their hands, the friends pooled their money together and targeted the perfect launch pad, which was the massive 2002 in-water boat show down in Florida. They named the shoe The Beach and priced it at a super reasonable $30. Now, when they set up their stall, the reaction from the public was exactly what Duke's had been. People laughed, they pointed, and they called them ugly. But the guys realized something incredible right there on the showroom floor. The sheer ugliness was actually a magnet. People just couldn't look away. The bizarre aesthetic drew such a massive crowd that they literally blocked the aisles. The fire marshal had to come out and use a megaphone just to clear a path. So they just started tossing pairs into the laughing crowd, telling them to try them on. And honestly, the comfort did the rest of the work. They sold out all 1,000 pairs right then and there.
Which brings us to Chapter 2, the rocket ship rise and thinking huge. So the founders noticed their shoe had a whole lot in common with a crocodile. Comfortable on land and in water, tough, durable, and honestly from the side, the shoe's profile even kind of looked like a crocodile's snout. So they officially renamed the brand Crocs and launched it with this brilliant tagline, "Get a grip." They also brought in an advisor, a retired entrepreneur named Ron Snyder, who gave them 2 simple words of advice: think huge. And man, did they ever. In 2003, which was their first full year, they did $1.2 million in revenue. They quickly bought out that Canadian foam company so they could own the technology outright, and they started expanding their models. Fast forward to 2006, Snyder is now the CEO, and they launched what was the largest footwear IPO in U.S. history, hitting a $1.15 billion market cap on day one. By 2007, revenue skyrocketed to $847 million. Suddenly, literally everyone was wearing them. Nurses, kids, gardeners, and yes, even the U.S. president.
But of course, gravity always kicks in. Chapter 3, the painful downfall and the edge of the cliff.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core problem. What looked like the absolute peak of a mountain to Crocs' leadership was actually the edge of a cliff. Instead of just sticking to what worked, Crocs decided they needed to be everywhere and everything all at once. They started pumping out golf shoes, flip-flops, sunglasses, and clothes. But the absolute peak of this absurdity, without a doubt, was a line called You by Crocs. This was a luxury women's fashion line selling high heels for $280, with styles unironically named things like the Dangerous Diva.
Customers were just baffled. Nobody wanted luxury heels from the quirky foam boat shoe company. They had completely abandoned their core identity. And it gets worse. Because they had promised investors this endless, exponential growth, they felt they couldn't slow down their assembly lines, even when consumer demand really started to dry up. By 2007, an unbelievable 30 million pairs of unsold shoes were just gathering dust in warehouses. To put that in perspective, that was $248 million completely locked up in dead inventory. They were massively overexposed. I mean, you could literally buy Crocs at 7-Elevens and local petrol pumps. Brand fatigue set in, and it set in incredibly fast.
That fatigue quickly mutated into outright public hatred. Two teenagers literally started a website called IHateCrocs.com, where they posted videos of themselves blowing up Crocs with firecrackers. Time magazine piled on, listing them among the 50 worst inventions. Add to this a few high-profile safety scares regarding kids getting them caught in escalators, and the brand's image was just in tatters. Then, the 2008 global financial crash hit. By 2009, this situation was so incredibly dire that their own external auditors, Deloitte, issued this devastating warning. The company's ability to continue as a going concern is doubtful. Just look at this brutal reality check. In just one single year, the company's valuation crashed from a massive 24,000 crore rupees all the way down to a measly 300 crore rupees. It was a complete and total financial wipeout. They were forced to close the original Canadian factory where the very first shoe was invented, and they had to lay off 2,000 employees. Financial experts in the media were openly calling them a zombie company, basically saying they were already dead, they just didn't know it yet.
But they weren't dead. Chapter 4. The billion-dollar comeback and a strategic resurrection.
Because it's not over until it's over. A massive strategic resurrection was made possible by a $200 million lifeline from the private equity firm Blackstone. But more importantly, they brought in a visionary management consultant named Andrew Rees, who would eventually step up as CEO. So the crucial point is how Andrew Rees diagnosed the core problem. He spent months diving deep into the data and realized something absolutely shocking. The original classic Croc was only making up 16% of their revenue at that point. Why? Because the company had been actively suppressing their own hero product. They were actually embarrassed by it, re-stepped in, and immediately implemented a ruthless 3-part survival plan. First, he killed off the high heels and all the non-core junk. Second, he forced the entire marketing focus squarely back onto the classic Crocs. And third, he closed the remaining company-owned factories and outsourced manufacturing to Asia. He essentially adopted an asset-light model, kind of like Nike, to save immense amounts of cash.
Okay, so survival was secured, right? But Rees wanted to thrive, and he ended up finding his golden ticket in something incredibly small, Jibbitz. Now, these were little plastic charms that a mom named Sherry had actually invented way back in 2005 just to decorate her kids' Crocs. Crocs had bought her company back then, but honestly did next to nothing with it for years. Well, Rees looked at a classic Croc, and he didn't just see a shoe, he saw 26 empty holes. The math behind this is just brilliant. Let's walk through it together. If a base pair of Crocs costs $50, but a customer decides to fill all 26 holes with $5 Jibbitz charms, that adds $130 to the transaction. Suddenly, a simple $50 shoe generates $180 in total revenue. It wasn't just a piece of footwear anymore. It became a highly profitable, highly personalized blank canvas. To really capitalize on this blank canvas idea, Rees completely revamped their marketing playbook and started securing some massive collaborations. In 2018, they partnered with superstar rapper Post Malone. And get this, his custom Crocs sold out in exactly 10 minutes. Then they collaborated with Bad Bunny, the high fashion house Balenciaga, and yes, even KFC. They signed licensing deals with Marvel, Disney, Harry Potter, you name it. Suddenly, Gen Z customers were absolutely flocking to the brand as a way to express their individuality. Soon enough, over 70% of all Crocs customers were buying Jibbitz alongside their shoes. It was a total game changer. By 2019, revenue had climbed all the way back up to $1.2 billion. And then, COVID-19 hit. But while the broader footwear and apparel industry completely crashed during the pandemic, Crocs did the exact opposite. Think about it. Their shoes were the ultimate lockdown footwear. They were comfortable enough for staying home all day and incredibly easy to sanitize if you did have to go out. Furthermore, they launched the Free Pair for Healthcare program, donating 860,000 pairs valued at around $40 million directly to frontline medical workers. This wasn't just practically helpful in a time of crisis, it generated an immense wave of authentic goodwill and totally revitalized their positive brand image on a global scale. And while everyone was stuck at home, something else was exploding in popularity: TikTok. Crocs quickly became a viral sensation on the platform without even really having to try very hard. Kids were organically posting unboxing videos, showing off their Jibbitz customizations, and doing these crazy before and after makeovers. Crocs smartly leaned right into this, launching the $1,000 Crocs challenge, basically daring their fans to spend $1,000 customizing their shoes. The result? Over 30 billion cumulative views on TikTok. That is billions of dollars in free cultural capital, perfectly positioning them as this trendy, self-aware, fun brand for a completely new generation. Let's look at the final numbers and see how this all builds into the grand finale. We started way back in 2003 with just $1.2 million. Then, through all the chaotic highs, the intense public hate, and the very real threat of bankruptcy, they fought their way to $1.2 billion in 2019. And by 2024, a staggering $4.1 billion in annual revenue. This data proves the overwhelming, undeniable success of their turnaround strategy. They didn't just survive falling off the cliff edge, they built an entirely new mountain.
Which leads us to our final chapter. Chapter 5. Embracing true identity and the final lesson. Because the ultimate lesson from the story of Crocs isn't just about clever supply chains or viral marketing tactics. It is fundamentally about identity. Crocs failed, and they failed spectacularly when they listened to their critics, got embarrassed by their own core product, and tried to pretend they were a high-fashion, conventional brand. But they became a multi-billion-dollar empire the exact moment they leaned into exactly who they were, apologizing to absolutely no one for being weird, colorful, and, yes, even ugly. So, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. What is your unique, ugly trait that you should be embracing right now instead of hiding? Whether it's in your business or in your personal life, remember the Crocs rule. When something is truly different, the world is first going to laugh at it. Then they'll accept it, and finally, they will celebrate it. Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer today. Until next time, embrace your weirdness.